Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Movie Mortis, where movie madness lives. My name is Nick. Who are you people?
I'm Drew.
Hey, yo, I'm Tim.
All right. And today we are discussing our first Tarantino movie on this episode. I mean, we've seen other Tarantino movies, but this will be. We're talking about Pulp Fiction. We're talking about Pulp Fiction.
Ugh.
And I've seen it before. Drew and everyone else here it was their first times, right? First times watching Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, first time seeing Pulp Fiction. I did see several years ago. Obviously, I know the burger scene,
Oh,
obviously.
big fan of the
Um,
burgers.
but yeah, yeah, that was. I remember I had watched the first, I want to say 20 minutes or so of it on Netflix several years ago.
Hmm.
But I never like actually sat down and watched the whole movie until today. And
Hmm.
I'm praying for this podcast, and I'm so glad I did because it was very, very good.
Oh yeah,
Worth
it's
it.
fun.
It definitely lives up to the hype.
It's funny when you mention that. I don't know if I mentioned this series before on a podcast, but my first exposure to Pulp Fiction was someone made like a parody of it where they summarized the entire film in 30 seconds, but all the characters are bunnies. 30-second bunnies. Yeah, basically it's a series where they summarize movies in 30 seconds, but with bunnies, and they've done a ton. Anyways, let's get into the meat and bones of this film, and not in Phil Lamar's scattered brains.
We should probably mention that there will be spoilers in this podcast.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
we should have mentioned this last podcast when we did Die Hard, but we're gonna go into every podcast where we talk about a specific movie as if you've seen the movie. So
Yeah. So let there be
spoiler,
spoilers to
yes.
one of Tarantino's most popular films. So, Drew, as the first time watching, I want to hear your opinion. What did you think of it as someone who's never seen this film before?
It was very good. It had a very, I know Tarantino has a lot of like classic filmmaking influences.
Hmm.
Like I'm talking movies from like the 50s and 60s. We know he's a big fan of like old spaghetti westerns and movies from that sort of time period.
Mm-hmm.
And Pulp Fiction, in many ways, does kind of feel like a movie from that time period in terms of its aesthetic, in terms of its
Yeah.
whole vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, because you have people, like you have people smoking throughout the whole movie. There's this one part where they go to this like 50s diner,
Oh yeah.
and where Vincent, John Travolta's character, and the girl that he was with, who was I think was the daughter of the mob boss in the movie, not the mob
Yeah.
boss, but
Mia Wallace, who played
Mia
Uma
Wallace.
Thurman.
He was Mr. Wallace's daughter, and so that whole scene has a very 50s vibe. I mean, you have like a waiter dressed as Marilyn Monroe and Buddy
Yeah.
Holly,
Buddy Holly.
and so
Ed Sullivan.
Ed
Yeah, it's
Sullivan,
like a
and it's like
very huge callback to like 50s Americana, if that's the term, Americana culture. I'm trying to sound smart right now.
yeah, yeah, and the whole movie kind of has that vibe to a degree.
Oh yeah, and it's if we're gonna talk about vibes, we gotta talk about the soundtrack, man. That soundtrack is just like
It's good.
it almost feels
I
like
didn't.
it's
I want to say I personally recognized any of the songs in there. It's like I couldn't tell you just by listening to it what the names of them are and stuff because it
I
was a lot
couldn't
of like
tell you
classic.
either, man. I'm more
Yeah,
familiar with
because
the
it was like a
Reservoir
lot
Dogs
of
soundtrack.
yeah, because it was more like classic rock and stuff like
Yeah,
that, which I respect.
you also got that opening surf rock song, which
Surf
was
rock.
sampled for the Black Eyed Peas song "Pump It."
I don't know that.
Oh, you don't know that
Um,
song? It goes "Pump It, I then pump it louder." That
dude, I
song.
don't. Dude, I don't listen to the Black Eyed Peas.
Well, they were a product of the time, so it is what it is.
anyways, um, anyways, um, I will say though, um, I, the biggest strength of this movie, I think, is the individual characters that you follow throughout these
Mm-hmm.
four stories. Look, I know everybody in this, when it comes to Pulp Fiction, talks about this particular character, but I could not get enough of Jules, Samuel L. Jackson's
Same,
character.
same. I love Jules.
And I swear, dude, Samuel L. Jackson in like everything, he's great.
Oh yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like I could not get enough of him. He's so energetic. He's so charismatic. I mean, even if a lot of his movies, especially these days, he kind of gets he plays. You can tell it's a Samuel L. Jackson. It's Samuel L.
Oh yeah,
Jackson, right? I mean, whenever you
absolutely.
see a Samuel L. Jackson in something, you don't necessarily always see him as that character. You see him as Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh yeah,
He's kind of one of those kind of actors,
yeah.
but it works. It works, and you can tell that this guy is like this very he's almost unhinged, especially in that apartment scene at the beginning, the infamous or famous burger scene.
Oh yeah,
And it's
and
like,
the
and he
apartment
was
says
like,
English, motherfucker. Do you speak it? I
I
just
also love. I actually didn't catch this the first time I saw the scene, but when when he's like, say what, one more time, say what again, and then he gets him to say what again by asking him
yeah,
a question, by
yeah.
asking him this weird question.
What I like about Jules' character is that he tries to appear all casual and cool. Like he just wants to ease his like his whoever he's talking to in. He's
Yeah.
just talking like, "Hey, you're eating food. What kind of food are you eating?" Yeah, and he doesn't just do this with like Brett in the company at the beginning, but he also does this with Jimmy, played by the man himself. Like he's like, "Dang, Jimmy, some gourmet stuff. Oh, by the way, we got
Yeah.
dead guy in the car. Please clean that up." Like he's just so casual about it, you know? It's
Yeah, both him and Vincent John Travolta's character are both very like you just said, they're very casual. I mean, he casually sprays someone's brains on the back of the car.
yeah.
That's
Well,
later on in the
Vincent always
movie.
came across as the more stoic and quiet one, whereas Jules did all the talking.
Well, but he's still talking. He's talking. He's got this gun pointed, and he just
Oh
like
yeah, it's like,
just
all right, was
pops
that
the guy.
divine intervention or pure coincidence?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think we mentioned this before we start recording, but what's I only know the actor's name. What's the character's name? Oh, Marvin. Marvin is
Um,
played by Phil Lamar, who many people might know as the voice of Samurai Jack and that one guy from Futurama.
yeah, Phil. That name sounds so familiar. He was the guy who Vincent shot in the back of the car, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny to think
Yeah,
that guy would become a prolific voice actor. All he had to do was get
yeah.
shot by John Travolta. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
he was actually talking about Pulp Fiction on his podcast with Jim Cummings, and I
Oh,
watched that interview.
well, what did he say about it? Do tell.
Yeah, he said like he read Samuel L. Jackson's emotions like very genuinely. Like he couldn't tell if Sam was so pissed off at Phil, and it was like he was scared shitless, and of course they I believe that Phil said like it was a good experience with being with Sam and John Travolta. I mean, he mentioned it like if you watch Jim Cummings' podcast, like you'd understand where he was coming from. Like it was a bit of a wild experience for him, and he was just often remembered as the guy who got shot in the face, and so there were actually a few takes of that scene. So
Oh,
yeah,
dang.
but I'd recommend checking out Jim Cummings. I'm sure you know who that
Yeah,
guy is.
Winnie
So
the Pooh, right? Jim Cummings, that's who he
of
is?
course, he profiles and interviews a lot of voice actors. So I'd check
Nice.
out his podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm curious now because I'm wondering if like did Phil Lamar say anything like what it was like working with not just Samuel and Travolta, but maybe Quentin himself?
And, something I think he delved into Quentin a bit and talked. I think he mentioned Bruce Willis as well. So
Oh yeah. Interesting. Hey, Tim, since you got the spell right now, this is your first time seeing Pulp Fiction. What'd you think of it?
so far, I thought the stupid massage joke went on for too long. So it's
Hmm.
like get to the point. Like we don't want to hear this stupid massage joke. I mean, we all know that Quentin Tarantino has very eccentric
Taste.
interests. Yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah, that
he.
works too. But here's the
I
thing.
mean that
Here's the
was
thing, Tim. Tarantino, he's known for putting like a bunch of like random dialogue in his films, and sometimes the dialogue contributes to the plot, sometimes it doesn't. And in the case of Pulp Fiction, that foot massage thing was. I mean, it didn't really. It only really built up to serve like the background of who this guy they worked for was. But if you watch something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there is just so much dialogue that feels like kind of stuff on the back burner. And that's kind of one of the staples too, is that Tarantino, all of his characters just talk casually about random things that don't correlate to the plot, but sometimes they do. Because I feel like in the case of the foot massage conversation, he's talking about how they kind of add more to the mystique of Marcellus Wallace, because John Travolta brings that up to Uma Thurman's character, Miss Wallace, where he's like, is it true that he killed someone because you gave him a foot massage? Like, I don't know. The only thing that guy ever did to me was give me a handshake. So I think it did add to the mystique, because I just rewatched this is my second time doing Pulp Fiction. And there was like so much stuff I didn't pick up on, and just kind of like how everything all calls back to something, even if it was completely out of order. Like,
Yeah. I definitely see what Tim is saying as far as that particular foot massage conversation, because it definitely at first it does kind of feel random. Like
yeah,
it
it
does
does.
feel what are they talking about? I mean, it makes sense it makes some sense once you realize kind of who they're talking about in the context of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see why, I can see what he's talking about. So
Yeah.
because I somewhat agree. I was like, that dialogue was a bit random.
It
It
was a
was.
bit random. It kind of was. Again, Tarantino, he is known for his dialogue. That's one of the
Yeah,
staples. Kind of like,
yeah.
well, sure. I was going to turn off to another director who's also known for his dialogue, and that is Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith would. I don't know if maybe this is a coincidence, if maybe he was influenced by Tarantino, but he also puts like random dialogue in his movies where characters just talk about completely unrelated subjects.
Yeah,
So
but
I
it
mean,
does. But it does also. On the flip side, though, kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate here. It does, though. Some of the random dialogue can feel a bit more casual.
oh
It
yeah,
can make it because I mean, how many times when you're talking with your friends or ever about something on the street, and you're just talking about something completely random that has
mm.
nothing to do with what you're doing or where you are.
Oh yeah,
So it's
I've
like
done that before.
it can make things kind of feel a bit more, almost a bit more believable. And
Yeah,
I hate to use the word real,
no, that's
but
fine.
I'm gonna use that word real. I'm gonna use that word
Real?
real because
Chad, is this real?
yeah,
Sorry.
because movies are not real.
Oh no, my life is a lie. I'm just kidding. Okay, go on, go on.
Yeah, I only kind of say that just because it's like I was sort of taught to think in like a lot of like my film classes and stuff that movies are not realistic, and so it's like I do kind of bring that into some of my film analysis as well.
Hmm.
That's why I'm a bit hesitant to use the word real, but you get my
Cool.
point, right? Some of that dialogue
Yeah,
can definitely feel more real because it feels like a casual conversation these two would have, and
yeah,
when they're on the way to do a job, you know.
yeah. And again, like going back to the foot massage thing, the focus wasn't about the foot massage; it was about whether it was kind of building up to whether or not Marcellus Wallace would literally kill someone for as. Okay, well maybe it was kind of useless. Who am I kidding? I'm just because again, I rewatched this film and I've noticed so many things like how Bruce Willis's character, which coincidentally we also talked about a film with Bruce Willis as well. But anyways, Pulp
Yeah,
Fiction. Bruce Willis's character, the boxer, it's mentioned that he killed somebody in a boxing match, and
yeah, yeah.
Marcellus Wallace upset. Well, here's the thing: he also ended up killing another person, and that was John Travolta's character when he was like trying to retrieve his watch from the apartment, and
Yeah.
he holds him at his gunpoint. But the Pop Tarts jump scare him and cause him to shoot John Travolta. Well, okay, they didn't really jump scare him, but like they caught him off guard. I just thought that was a funny way to describe it.
I will say now that you bring up those Pop Tarts, if you notice, there's a bit of a close up on those on the boxes. It doesn't actually say Pop Tarts. It just says it as a very generic like toaster pastries
Oh
logo.
yeah, yeah.
Because I guess they didn't want to give Kellogg's any royalties, so
The
I
weird
guess
part
they
is
just
I read somewhere that Tarantino was not a fan of product placement, so he'd create Big Kahuna burgers and Apple cigarettes,
yeah.
which is a reoccurring product brand within his own films. Um,
Although
And
if Big Kahuna Burger was real, I would totally have
same.
it.
Tim, if Big Kahuna burger was real, would you eat it? Tim.
Tim.
yeah, I would, but I find it funny that, and yet, Sam mentions McDonald's, Burger King, like, aren't those
Yeah.
technically copyrighted or?
They are, and I was going to bring that up too. That's a good point. Like, even though I read somewhere again, Tarantino doesn't like product placement, so he created Big Kahuna and Apple cigarettes. But he casually, one of the first things that Vince and Jules talk about is what do they call a Big Mac in Paris or a quarter pounder in Paris?
Well, they also don't show any like McDonald's or Burger King logos either, so that might have
Yeah,
have a thing of it too. I don't know if it's technically copyright infringement if you mention a fast food chain, a certain business or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't
Yeah. I
know.
mean, again, bringing back the Kevin Smith argument in Clerks, there's literally there's an entire scene where they discuss the moral implications of blowing up the Death Star from Star Wars. Like they straight up mention it in Star Wars. So I really don't think there's like a huge copyright if you have your characters talk about things like McDonald's or is it what was it morally like right to blow up the Death Star because think of all those contract workers. That was actually in the movie, by the way. That they genuinely bought
Yeah,
up.
yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to do Clerks one day. That's like my favorite film ever made. I'm not kidding. Anyways, Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, well, I will say something a lot, because honestly, a lot of what I have to say about Pulp Fiction is I'm sure the same stuff that everybody says about Pulp Fiction, right? Because it's one of the most overanalyzed movies of all time.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I think we do need to talk about how good it is at nonlinear storytelling,
Yeah. Yeah.
telling the story out of order, because I think if you tried to tell the same story in chronological order, I don't think it would work.
To be honest, yeah, it would not because it would not work at all. In fact, it would just be really, really strange and awkward. If I'm being completely
Yeah,
honest.
And why is that?
it would be.
Okay, so the reason. Wait, what was your question, Tim?
Well, so why prefer it to be out of place instead of chronological order?
Because
So
shoot, Drew, you explain, man. I'm blanking out. I'm blanking out right now, man.
So, if you were to tell this movie to tell this story in chronological order, there are certain moments and certain things that wouldn't necessarily have the impact that they would have if they were told out of sequence. Because it all depends on perspective, what perspective you're telling this particular story or particular part of the story from. It depends on what information those characters know, what the audience knows or doesn't know. Like there's things that you have to sort of uh, jumble, if that makes sense. And so, would that have like the scene at the end, for example? When they're talking about the briefcase and they have like the guns pointed to each other and stuff. Do you think that would have the same impact as if it was in the middle of the movie as compared to at the end?
oh
This
yeah.
is an open question. Anybody can
No,
answer.
no, I don't think it would be because if we told the story in order, it would end with I'm trying to remember Butch, that's his name. Butch, Bruce Willis's
Butch, yeah.
character, escaping on a motorcycle, and it feels so weird. It's like, okay, so the whole point of takeaway was that because here's the thing, like I think it ended well with the breakfast scene, the diners, because
Yeah.
it kind of told a story of how bad the gangster life is and what you have to deal with. And in a way,
Yeah.
Jules got out because of a revelation from God. I mean, because, yeah. I mean, I don't want to call Pulp Fiction a Christian story, but, that was just kind of like, that was Jules's redemption. Like, he's been surrounded by all this death. And in the end of the film, he says, I always said this Bible verse because I thought it was just something cool to say when you kill somebody, but not today. No, that I understand that I'm trying to be a righteous man protecting someone, even though I've been evil all my life. In fact, one scene, that ending scene kind of sticks with me because just the way Samuel L. Jackson says, but I'm trying, man, I'm trying. Like,
Yeah.
he wants to change. He wants to get away from this crooked life.
Yeah, and I think because then I'm trying to think of the whole point of the story of Butch, the boxer character, Bruce Willis character. I'm
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
think what's the point of that to the overall story, and I think that's what you just talked about is
Yeah.
all the
You,
crap that
you
you have
get
to
you get
deal
tied
with
up in
and
mob business, you're gonna get
exactly.
fucked.
Exactly. I mean, he just goes to this one guy area to get his father's gold watch,
Hmm.
and he ends up
Ends up killing somebody. He
well,
ends up crashing his
yeah.
car. He uh
Hmm.
he almost gets
Yeah.
fucked, quite literally.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that whole scene is well, let's just say it's weird. Let's just
yeah,
say
it's weird.
that.
What's funny too is
It's like if you were to show that scene to somebody just totally out of context, they'd be like, "What the fuck is this? Like,
oh yeah,
is this a snuff film?"
I'm gonna get over analytical here. I'm gonna get over because as I said, like I'm not trying to say this is a Christian film or whatever, but this had me thinking of like Jules's redemption. This is also in a way Butch's not really redemption per se, but like when he wants to leave Marcellus Wallace, quite literally getting fucked. He kind of has this moment of clarity, like I might as well go save him. So he saves him. He's cool with Marcellus Wallace. Now, granted, he can't show his face in LA anymore, but he pretty much has no debt to him. It's just as long as he doesn't say anything, he's cool.
Yeah, he has no debt to him, and he can kind of restart his life.
Yeah, exactly.
In another city.
Because I mean, when you think about it, the whole film is technically a redemption story, not just with Jules, but with Butch. I mean, because again, I'm not
even the plot synopsis on Amazon Prime mentions redemption.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty obvious theme.
But I feel like with Butch, it's like it's kind of like a love thy neighbor and love thy enemy. So he saves him, and now Marcellus Wallace is never gonna forget this. Hey, we're cool now. Yeah, again, I'm not trying to put a Christian spin on it, but there was a mention of whether or not Jules and Vincent surviving was divine revelation.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think you're, by bringing some of that religious stuff in. I mean, that's in the movie, so I don't think you're like off base or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that stuff is brought into the movie to begin with. Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not just there to sound cool, even though some of it does sound cool. That's not the point of it. It's meant to serve a purpose to the story and to the characters.
Yeah, there's I mean, the mob business is not just full of violence, but even depravity with all the drugs and stuff.
All the drugs. Oh yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, there's a scene where a character ODs on cocaine.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of, especially early on in the film, there's a lot of shots of people doing drugs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, that's what makes me feel like. Remember how I mentioned the retro feel of this movie? It almost feels. I know this movie came out in the '90s, but it has some of the scenes of people doing coke and stuff. Almost makes it feel like an '80s movie, if that makes sense. Not to overgeneralize the '80s, but I mean,
no, the '80s was a wild time.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that either take place in the '80s or that were made in the '80s where there was a lot of people doing drugs. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see that. What's funny, I did a little bit of research, and this is actually based on all the pulp magazines, hence the term Pulp Fiction, and even the movie poster looking like a magazine cover.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I was kind of after the movie ended. I was trying to figure out why is this movie called Pulp Fiction. But no, that makes sense with the magazine stuff because it almost does feel like an anthology movie to a degree.
Yeah, it
right?
kind of is actually.
Almost like how a comic book would be, where it tells 3 or 4 short stories. I mean, you can probably edit these stories and make short films out of it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Like, I mean, the obvious one I think is Butch's story, but I mean, you can say the one about all of them. Oh, Samuel L. Jackson's character, Jules.
Yeah.
It's like his story lasts like what, a total of like a third of the movie.
Technically, yeah, the beginning of the movie and the ending.
Yeah, and it's like you don't see him for a good chunk of it. Yeah. They focus on these other stories, but I like how they actually kind of intertwine some of these stories. Like how when I think it's when Butch is getting ready for the boxing match, there's a shot of Mr. Wallace coming in. You can see John Travolta's character just he's just there.
Oh yeah. And you don't see Jules there because by that point in the story he's like, I'm done, man. I'm gonna go walk the earth.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting watching the ending of the movie with Vincent knowing that he dies like the next day.
Yeah,
and he doesn't get out.
He doesn't. He dies due to an accident. Surprisingly.
Yeah.
In the same way that Butch killed someone during a boxing match, he killed someone with a Pop-Tart jump scare. Yeah. That's just so funny to think about. But
hey, it's called a toaster pastry, Nick.
Toaster pastry, right. Pop-Tarts don't exist in the Tarantino universe, but I think someone could invent that. But yeah, Pulp Fiction, like on the surface, there's a bunch of like violence and smoking and swearing and
Yeah.
like
All
80s
that
stuff, but at its core, I think it really is a story about redemption
I
altogether.
mean, like I said, I don't think you're grasping at straws or anything. I mean, it's again, if the plot synopsis on streaming services are mentioning redemption, then it's a pretty obvious theme.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what I'm always thinking to whenever I watch a movie. It's like I'm thinking, okay, what's the, what are the themes? And that's kind of the major one I got was, how you can almost kind of like how you can find ways to exit a bad life. You know,
Oh yeah.
like
And
how you can be in this fucked up life one day, but then things happen, and you can find your way out of it in like in a not necessarily a negative manner. How things can break your way, or you can do these things, and you can get out of it able to live a life,
mm-hmm.
but without also having to become a rat, as they say in the
Yeah,
in the
it's
mafia
like
world.
one bad. It's and I also want to bring this up too is that it's a lesson I've been seeing a lot of people push a one. It's sometimes one good act can have more impact than a bad act as well because
Yeah,
again, Butch not only did he save Marcellus Wallace, but he got his debts paid off and he and Wallace are cool under certain conditions. And Jules,
yeah,
not only did he leave the business, but that end diner scene where he says, where he tricks the robbers,
yeah,
Viola, I think her name is,
yeah,
and Ringo. Basically, he says, I'm giving you this money not because you're robbing me, but I'm using it to buy your life to save it. And
yeah,
and like
yeah, and
you can see him like
and they
how the
can.
robbers start off so confident at the beginning of the movie, but now they feel so humbled and gracious. Not I mean, yeah, Jules technically threatened him, but he wanted to give his new perspective on life. And
Yeah,
not only did he did he spare them, and he also kind of saved the entire coffee shop from getting robbed too. So, and
yeah. I
again,
mean,
like,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure those two robbers. I wouldn't be shocked if they had gotten arrested after the movie ended.
oh yeah,
But
they
I
they
mean,
probably were arrested, but like, again, sometimes a good act can have more impact than a bad act. It's like, yeah, people in Pulp Fiction, they get shot, they get killed, but it's not as memorable as Jules sparing Ringo and just and just kind of letting him leave.
yeah, yeah. It
And
was
that
gonna something I was gonna say, but now I forgot.
shoot, I'm sorry. Hmm. It's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah,
That's something I thought
yeah,
about
that's
lately
a
too. As I rewatched that scene, I'm like, dang, this guy's a holy man, or
yeah.
maybe God's getting maybe he finally. Sorry, again with the yeah again divine intervention.
hmm And
It's
you
fu-
can tell Vincent doesn't necessarily like he kind of struggles to accept that whole divine intervention thing. He
yeah.
just seems to think that was kind of just luck or
Mm-hmm.
whatever he says. But so that's kind of a part of it too.
Oh yeah, too definitely because Vincent just seems to see it just another part of the job.
Yeah,
Like,
another
oh
day at the
yeah,
office.
another day at the office ain't no divine intervention until one day. Oh hi Bruce Willis, pop. That's such a weird way. I just realized how weird that sounded with me making sound effects. What's funny too is that
Yeah,
you can actually kind of hear him scream when he gets shot. Like he just
yeah,
sounds
you
so
can.
horrified.
Yeah.
Um, but I had something else to say. It's kind of blanking out on me again. So if anyone wants to say something, feel free. I'm tagging somebody in.
Remember? I know we're kind of flip flopping between different talking points, but remember how I said the very like retro feel of the movie? Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I'm just remembering now. A lot of the shots in the movie are pretty static. You know what I mean? Where the camera is on one place. There's a few like when Bruce Willis is in the phone booth, the camera does like go around the phone
Mm-hmm.
booth. But for the
Oh yeah.
most part, it's a very old school style of filmmaking where the camera doesn't move all that much. And
Oh yeah.
sometimes and sometimes it'll stay on the long shot on the shot for a long time, even if there's no camera movement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very simplistic. So the way they shot this movie is very simplistic in that. in that way.
That I did notice a few shots where a lot of static. There was a lot of static going on, and only rarely does the camera move. But when it does move, it takes advantage of it being moved around. Like most of the moving shots are like pretty long shots. Like when Jules and Vincent are walking down to the apartments, talking about whether or not a foot massage was really worth somebody throwing somebody off a roof for, or the dance scene where they're doing the twist contest.
I hated that scene.
And
I'm not a big fan of like dance scenes like that in general. I just find them to be kind of, again, I hate using this word too, but I do kind of feel like it was a bit cringe, but I think that was kind of the point.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, also too, in regards to like the way it's shot, there's, or more specifically, I guess this is more of the way it's edited. But if you notice that a lot of the close-ups in the movie are basically insert shots. You know what I mean? Where it's just
Yeah.
shots of hands, either
Yeah,
doing
shots of
like
hands, shots
shots
of
of
like
hands and
cocaine, shots of Uma Thurman's feet.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm might just not be. I'm not that I like memorize every single shot of a movie the first time I see it, but
Mm.
there didn't seem to be a lot of outside of. I mean, there's a few like there's medium close-ups, right, of like a character's face.
Yeah.
But was there ever a close up of like a character's eyes or a specific besides those insert shots that we just mentioned earlier?
Not really. No, I can't really. I mean, maybe I don't know if this counts as a close up, but there's the scene in the diner where Samuel Jackson is holding Ringo at gunpoint, and like the camera.
Yeah.
Let's say, okay, viewers they can't see this, but my hand's like the gun, and like my face is in count. I can, yeah, something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
So yeah,
I
there was
think,
shots like that.
yeah,
I,
there's
I guess
shots
I'm
like,
more talking about I guess I'm more talking about extreme close-ups on the
yeah.
things. It's outside of those insert shot that I just mentioned, or maybe I'm getting them confused as one or the other. But because I
Also,
know insert shots are kind of extreme close-ups, that's kind of the
yeah.
point.
I think
But
the only extreme close up I can think of was somebody doing cocaine, but that was it.
yeah, that would kind of qualify as an insert shot.
Hmm.
You know, because insert shots are ones that they don't require any like effects or anything. They're just these simple shots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. There wasn't really a lot of close ups unless again the only ones I can think of were like I said the diner scene. Oh yeah,
And like I said,
no, that's an insert shot. Jules's wallet, bad motherfucker.
yeah, that's definitely an insert shot. I liked that though. The bad motherfucker wallet. That was
Oh
cool.
yeah, yeah.
I wonder if they sell replicas of that at like movie prop stores. That would
Hmm.
be cool.
I don't know, but I think I did see a photo of the suitcase. I did like the actual prop suitcase they
Oh,
used,
oh,
and they even had
that's
it
that's
open.
something. That's something I wanted to ask you guys about. What do you think was in that suitcase? Because they never show what's in that suitcase.
I gotta
Well,
think. What do you think was in the suitcase, Tim?
based on the apartment scene, it looked like it was solid gold to me.
Well, they said it was his boss's dirty laundry, and it really shocked.
That could be anything.
It really put
That
It really put Ringo for a shock. So, could be solid gold. Could have been maybe a human heart or
or a
something.
human head or something.
Human
It could be
head.
it could be literally anything. Because
Yeah.
I see what Tim was talking about because there was that kind of that gold reflection that gold
Oh
lighting that came
yeah, the
out of the
gold.
briefcase as he opened. So it's
Mhm.
like I can see why you would think that, but like I said, it could be anything. It could have just been an effect.
Yeah.
But it could be anything that's in
Yeah.
there.
What's interesting, I remember hearing this from a YouTube video, is that if the suitcase actually works really well as a mystery because it's not the focus.
Yeah.
It's just there as a side and it leads to viewers. It's not the whole focus of the film. If what was in the suitcase was the focus, then the whole plot would revolve around the suitcase. Like, for example, if it
Yes.
was a bunch of bars of gold, then the movie would be about how the mafia is trying to safely escort bars of gold. Or if it was Marcellus Wallace's soul, it would be about I'm paraphrasing the YouTuber I heard this from. It would be about mafia trying to escape the devil.
Yeah.
But
There's
the
a lot.
suitcase
There's a
works
lot
as
of
a
like
mystery box.
yeah, and it leaves and it really depends on your interpretation,
Yeah.
right? It depends on how you look at it, and
Hmm.
but at the same time, it's like it's not. You don't necessarily have to know what's in. in the suitcase. I mean, if you had to know, the movie would have showed you at some
Oh
point,
yeah, absolutely.
but
It's
you
a
don't
side. The
need to.
suitcase isn't the focus. The story is about how the mob business and how two people manage to get out of it, whether it be through divine intervention or just an act of goodwill.
Yeah. I guess the one other key thing I want to talk about is something we kind of touched on a little bit before, but we need to talk about the tone of the movie and how, like, there are times where this movie is just straight up funny, I think, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
like
definitely.
especially whenever Samuel L. Jackson is on screen, before the ending, I should say.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely see it as like a very like how do I don't want to use the term pulpy, but I'm gonna do it anyways. Kind of pulpish, like
Yeah.
very like again, like you said, a comic book, like specifically an '80s comic book where it's a little flashy. There's a lot of color going on. Actually, there's a whole
Yeah.
lot of
Oh, yeah.
color in the
Very
film.
colorful
Even in
movie.
the
Very
dark parts,
colorful movie.
like in the basement where Wallace and Butch are bound and gagged. There's color in those in that film. There's a whole
Yeah.
lot of color. It just
Yeah.
it brings out that 80s vibe, but they decided to splash a little grime on it because of all the violence and drugs and depravity going on.
Yeah. And I think the humor adds to that as well, along
Oh,
with the color
absolutely.
palette and the
Mm.
visuals, because this movie it deals with dark subject matter. Because I mean, anytime you're talking about the mafia or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or any sort of like crime syndicate, it's not exactly a super fun thing inherently,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
this stuff's pretty dark. But I think the comedy kind of adds. It doesn't make it so that combined with the color palette, those two things combined with each other makes it so that it doesn't. It's not this super dreary, dark, depressing movie. It's
Mm.
still a movie you can kind of turn on and kind of have fun with.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, yeah.
And
It is it is a fun
one of the
movie. I
scenes,
mean,
one of the scenes that I think is kind of underrated is when the problem solver character, you know who I'm talking about,
oh
right?
yeah, the
When
wolf.
when the wolf, when Vincent and Jules, like when they're cleaning up all their blood and stuff, when he's like strip it down to your bare ass, as they say, and so they're
Oh
naked and he's
yeah.
spraying them with the
Yeah, they
hose.
spray them. It's like y'all been in prison before. Y'all experience this, and like when they get dressed up, Tarantino says they look like a couple of dorks. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be honest with how much he dropped the N word in that movie. I thought he was gonna call him another word for cigarette in the British terms.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and again, it all kind of ties back into the way the story is told because, because that apartment scene is right directly following that is a
Mm-hmm.
scene where Vincent and Jules go into this bar where Butch and Mr. Wallace is,
Yeah.
and you can see they've changed clothes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like if you're not paying attention, that can be really confusing. Like
Oh
why did
yeah.
they change clothes? But again, all has to do with how the story is told, just completely out of order and everything.
Oh yeah.
So
Definitely. Yeah. Um. Uh.
I also like how they separate each of the four stories. They have like its own title card, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like they kind of cut from one story. They kind of give you the intro to the next one, and then it shows the title card, and then it goes forward with the story, which I think is
Yeah.
very helpful because I think if it didn't have that, it would be very confusing.
Oh yeah. What I found interesting is that the first two stories always end in some kind of taboo or taboo or violent subject matter. Like the first part of the story ends with, the first part of the story ends with someone getting shot. The second part ends with somebody recovering from a drug overdose. Now, granted, they make it home
Mhm.
safely, but they kind of have that feel where just like this does not leave us. This is only between you and
Yeah,
me. Kind of like
yeah,
that this one movie I had to watch for one of my film classes. I can't remember the name of it because it's about like it's titled after like 5 days, five weeks or whatever it's called. Like I don't remember. It was a Romanian film. But anyways,
hmm
the point I'm making. But anyways, second half, Butch's story ends with him saving Marcel's Wallace and him being no longer in debt to him and
yeah,
leaving. Whereas the last part of the movie, it's about Jules is like, I'm done with violence. I don't want to do this anymore. Here's some money. I saved your life. I saved this whole restaurant. I'm done with the mafia business. Like they all end in like a more cathartic or not. they both of them, both those endings are a bit cathartic in their own way, but they're not as dark. Like they all feel like they just left from a violent outcome. Like the ending where
Yeah.
a movie protagonist walks away from a battlefield, just all the
Yeah.
bodies around. Is like, I'm done, man. I did it.
Although I'm not sure if you necessarily look at that the ending of the second story in the same way, just because it's like that girl's gonna be screwed up for a while after that
Oh
drug
yeah, definitely.
overdose,
Yeah,
right?
the
I
second
mean,
story. Yeah, again,
it's
they almost died from a drug OD, and they said, this stays between us. And not to mention,
yeah,
it's even more tragic when you know that Jules dies later on. Not
yeah.
Jules, Vincent. Fuck, Vincent.
Vince, yeah. But again, it's not necessarily one to one comparison just because it's like with Butch's story, he goes on, yes, there's a thing in between him and Mr. Wallace, but he's still able to go start a new life with his girlfriend and all that. Whereas like with that girl, I forget her name, the I forget her name, the daughter of Mr.
Mia
Wallace,
Mia
Mia
Wallace.
Wallace, yes. Whereas with Mia, it's like there's you don't necessarily get that because again, she's going to be screwed up for a while from that drug overdose, and it's
Oh,
like
absolutely, yeah.
there's no quote unquote happy ending. I know I'm being a bit too general, but
Oh
you
no,
know
no,
what I mean. It's
you're
a bit
not
of a
wrong.
it's an interesting juxtaposition between the ending of that story and the ending of the last two stories.
And I know I said that Butch gets off scot free for helping Marsosos, but remember he killed.
Yeah, it's not really scot free, but it's
Yeah,
as free as you can be in his
yeah.
situation.
It's the bittersweet outcome.
Yeah. Whereas like with Mia, it's not really bittersweet because yeah, she survived the drug overdose, but she's probably going to be fighting some sort of
Yeah.
either withdrawal or whatever from afterwards for a while.
I feel like it's one of those films that start off getting slowly cathartic. Like first one starts off violent, bad. Second one,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, they escape, but there's still some dark shadow. Third one, good as you can be. Fourth one, okay, you're free, man. You
yeah,
found God.
yeah. So I like those levels to it. That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
really
big escalation.
yeah.
I'm gonna. Oh shoot. I had two topics on hand. One of which I memorized. The other one I didn't memorize. But I'm gonna tell you one to memorize. This is actually a very funny detail in the movie. So, this is a small detail, but the manager of the coffee shop, played by Rob Roof,
Yeah.
one of his final lines is, "I'm no hero. I'm just a coffee shop." Before he gets interrupted. Guess what
Yeah.
he is credited as?
What's he credited as?
Coffee shop.
It's funny. No, not
Yeah.
as coffee shop manager, just coffee
Not
shop.
coffee shop manager, just coffee shop. And here's the thing, like my headcanon, like this is a bigger headcanon than what's in the briefcase, but his real name is Coffee Shop. They even said that at his baptism. Yeah.
Imagine that being on a job application.
Okay, Mr. Coffee Shop.
First name coffee, last name shop.
Yeah. I'm no hero. I'm just a coffee shop. Get down. And like it's actually the credit. Go back and watch the credits. Look for Robert Roof Coffee Shop. It's in there. It's in there. Oh my gosh.
I love little details.
Oh
It's
yeah.
so fun.
What's I think one it's funny. This actually sticks out like a sore thumb because it took place in a completely different time period within the film, but. Butch's flashback of his dad getting, not his dad, but his dad's war friend delivering the watch.
I like that they included that because it kind of set it up, that story, that part of the story.
Yeah. And I wonder if, because you mentioned like Tarantino, he brings back all his flashbacks to like old things, like even pre-'80s. Like not only did he get a flashback to the diner scene where you had Marilyn Manson, Buddy Holly, Ed Sullivan, the twist dance, Marilyn Monroe.
You said
Marilyn
Manson.
I just realized I said Manson. I'm like, wait a second, Marilyn Monroe.
We don't talk about Marilyn Manson around here.
Yeah. So I only talk about the music, but not about the person. Anyways,
let's go. Let's
but what I was gonna say is that you get this flashback to like I'm assuming the '60s because it was like sometime in war. Like this kid is like he has like a very old TV set, like big, bulky, and boxy, and he's watching like some show that uses like a very primitive form of animation where the best I can describe it, it's like it's kind of like the annoying orange, but like you only see the mouths moving.
Yeah, that flashback is either got to be the late 60s or very early
Yeah.
70s. One of those
Like
two.
there is a term for that. I just don't know what it was. Hey Tim, you're big in the animation. Help me out here, man.
Yeah.
So there's back in like the '60s, the most primitive form of animation, where it's like an animation, and you see a character's head, but their mouths are like very live action. It's kind of like the annoying orange, but it's only the mouths
Clutch
being animated. Do you know what that term's called?
well, it's definitely from Clutch Cargo. I know for certain, but it's like I can't find the term for it. Let me look it up.
It's all good, man. I was just wondering if you knew it. I was just wondering, man, because again, like we're talking about how Quentin likes is kind of like he really does like to make a lot of callback to a bunch of old things because those old things inspired him, and not
Yeah.
yeah, whether it be like a '60s themed
It
cafe
was
or even that
Synchrovox.
'60s flashback, huh?
It was Synchrovox.
Synchrovox, yeah, it was like the Synchrovox cartoon. That might have been Clutch Cargo playing on the TV, but I wouldn't know. But and because that's kind of Quentin's whole career is just kind of making callbacks to like really old stuff that he liked, and hey, I got nothing against that, man. Sometimes some artists can get a little self-indulgent and make references to things only they like. Because when you mentioned before, not only is Quentin inspired by like old westerns, but Kill Bill was a tribute to like very old kung fu movies,
Yeah.
samurai
Yeah.
movies as well. In fact,
Yeah.
this is further cemented. Like I remember reading a joke somewhere saying, "If we lose Quentin, we won't have another director like him." And someone jokingly said, "All we have to do is find a film student, strap him to a chair, force him to watch like old ass movies from like the '60s with a 6 or below on IMDb." And give him, and then give him an interest in feet somehow against his own will. Well, not just a film student, but someone who's worked at a video store, a movie.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's the. So I think as funny as that joke is, that does kind of describe Tarantino. Really, he likes old
Yeah.
movies. He likes not just old movies, but just like stuff that we probably never heard of. Because jumping just to scrape Kill Bill surface once again. Most the song that everyone knows is the Kill Bill theme song. That's actually called Battles Without Honor, I think. And I think that's what it's called. But it's based on a really old Japanese movie. But nowadays, everyone just calls it the Kill Bill theme.
Yeah, that makes sense since Kill Bill
I
is
mean,
popular.
it's not just Kill Bill. Going back to what we're talking about, but the opening to Pulp Fiction, the little surf rock song. People, I
Yeah.
think, will know that more as either the Pulp Fiction theme song or that one song the Black Eyed Peas sampled.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you start referencing obscure things, if your thing becomes big enough than the thing you're referencing, people now know it more for that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole of things that reference Journey to the West, but are standing up on their own. And yeah,
that's what kind of one of the things that I think makes Tarantino. I mean, to be fair, he's not the only director that is influenced by more niche things,
oh
but
yeah,
it does.
definitely.
So some
I'm
of
influenced by niche things.
yeah, and some of that can help, especially since they are niche. The things that they're trying to influence from can make them seem more unique to most people who may not be aware of those niche things.
Yeah, and once again, Eli Roth, he was influenced by Japanese filmmaker Takashi Miike, and he ended up making him cameo in Hostel.
I'm trying to remember. I'm
Which
trying to remember who that was.
he was the guy that basically warned him not to go in. Yeah, dude got
I
his
need.
favorite director to warn the protagonist not to go into the hostel.
Oh, I think
He's like a
about.
1 second. He's just not a big character. He's just.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
if
That's
you-
why I was. That's why I was trying to remember it because
Yeah.
a lot of the
So
stuff from that movie is not that. So,
yeah,
but
but yeah, when you mention like when you reference niche things, said niche things may become more popular from the fact that you were influenced by it.
yeah.
I mean, heck, there's a whole rabbit hole with influences that can go down. Like one of them, I just learned about one of H.P. Lovecraft's influences was an old novel about a play that made people insane. It wasn't a Lovecraft novel. It was one that influenced him, but And again, Tarantino, he's into so much niche things. He's practically referenced it in all of his films.
Yeah. Trying to think, there's not really much else I really have to add about Pulp Fiction. It's one of those, like I kind of said at the beginning of this, it's one of those movies that have been so overanalyzed that
Oh
it's
yeah,
hard to find new things to say about it.
exactly. Oh, I guess one thing I can add, because this is something I know is my second rewatch. The part where Butch decides to save Marcel's wall is like, first time I watched it, I thought he had a more visible reaction because his reaction was just more or less kind of him staring at the camera, kind of contemplating it. But
Yeah.
I thought he had more of a physical reaction where he kind of moaned and grinned at himself at disappointment, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing, kind of deal. But no, he just kind of did so stoically. Which I remember that scene very differently. So
I will say though, Bruce Willis's facial reactions, what he does with his face when he goes into the door and see them, well, fucking Mr. Wallace. Some of the
yeah,
some of the facial acting he does it's both really good, but also kind of funny. No, I'll be
yeah,
honest, because it's very like I know people listening to this can't see what I'm doing, but it's like it's very like if you were to be like, hey, make it like a disgusted shocked face, that's kind of what it would be.
yeah. Yeah, and one more thing since I mentioned it, but I think I remember reading somewhere that the reason why Bruce Willis picked the samurai sword, his character picked the samurai sword, is I think Quentin kind of sprinkling in his influence of obscure Japanese movies.
Yeah, and it was cool that he got to use a sword and stab that one guy.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I also like how
kind of do a slice and stab kind of kill,
yeah,
which
and
I
then
thought was
he turned around, faced that security cop guy, and as the fucking what was it, Zeb, the guy's name,
Zed was his
as
name.
he was still bleeding out, he just stabbed him again from behind, which was
Oh
really
yeah,
badass.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, again, like I remember that scene going a little differently, like with just maybe him slicing him once and that's it. But no, he did a slice, swing, kind of stab
Yeah.
motion. So, sorry, I'm making so many weird sound effects in my mouth in this episode. But yeah,
All right.
that's all I got for Pulp Fiction. It is such an amazing film, and watching a second time, just I picked up on so much stuff I didn't realize my first time watching.
Yeah, same here. This one
I think Pulp Fiction is one of those films you can just rewatch and have that same feeling, and I think that's what makes it a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
like I said, there's not much new we can. I think that
That
we can
being
add
said,
to it
I
anymore.
think Reservoir Dogs is my favorite Tarantino film.
All right, well, we
So,
can discuss that another time.
oh,
This is
absolutely.
just about Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
I should
I think
actually
this is. What
should
were you saying?
actually
ahead, Tim.
finish. I should actually finish the rest of the film. While I'm at it. I mean, it does seem interesting. I'll give it that. So I'll try to finish watching it soon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It's a really great film. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I give it a double big Kahuna burger out of 10 with a side of fries.
A double big Kahuna burger out of toaster pastries.
I give it I give it 10 pieces of Marvin's shattered brain specks out of 10. No, out of a katana. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Or I give
All
it
right. I think this would be a good time to probably wrap this episode up. I'm not sure
I
there's much more else
agree.
we can
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been
add.
Movie Mortis. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a good day now. Bye.
We'll see you next time.
hi guys. It was great.